You're listening to the Loida Lewis podcast, hosted by Loida Nicolas Lewis. She's a trailblazing businesswoman, leader, philanthropist, and the widow of Reginald F. Lewis, the visionary leader who was the first African American to build a billion-dollar company. With unparalleled determination, Loida Lewis has not only excelled as a successful attorney, but also shaped a billion-dollar empire. Following the untimely passing of her husband, Reginald F. Lewis, she took the helm of TLC Beatrice, carving her legacy as a successful business leader. Be inspired and learn from her as she shares her wisdom, the secrets to her success in both business, in love, and in life. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn. With your host, Miss Loida Lewis.
Welcome to the Loida Lewis podcast. And today, I have the pleasure of presenting to you Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, and recently, her new documentary, Nurse Unseen. So, here she is, Michele Josue. Thank you, Michele, for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. It's an incredible honor to meet you and to speak with you today.
Well, the honor is mine because I just saw your documentary, Nurses Unseen. And for all those who are watching now, please take a look at your movie theaters because it is being shown in the United States. So tell us, Michele, how did you think of having this as a documentary?
Thank you for that question, because thinking of Nurse Unseen took many years. So being Filipino, of course, I have a lot of nurses in my family, and specifically my auntie, Tita Dodo, she had a big part in raising me. It was basically like my second mom, and she came to the United States in 1968 as a foreign exchange visitor nurse. And then her first major job was at Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where she worked with cancer and leukemia patients. But she lived with us growing up and just had such a huge hand in raising me. And I always wanted to honor her in some way. So as a filmmaker, I was thinking a lot about one day I would love to do a film to pay tribute to her and the other nurses like her who often don't get recognized in the way that they should. But then it was the pandemic, and I was really seeing how essential our frontline workers were to keeping us safe, and specifically our Filipino American nurses, how integral they were to the whole effort, against fighting COVID-19. And when we heard about the report from National Nurses United in late 2020 that outlined very heartbreaking data that our nurses, even though they only made up 4% of the registered nursing workforce here in the United States, at the height of COVID, they were 31.5% of the COVID nurse deaths. So my idea of wanting to honor my titas, coupled with what we were going through with COVID, I kind of married the two together and decided this is a documentary that needs to be made right away because everybody should know about what's happening to our community.
That's true. So did you hear that? We are only 4% of the registered nurses in the United States.
Yes.
But during COVID, 32% of our Filipino nurses died. That is so much,
yes,
giving our lives, our nurses' lives, Filipino nurses' lives. So tell me, your Tita Dodo, you said, helped you raise you?
Yes.
So where was this?
This was in Washington, D.C. area, so actually in Maryland. So we grew up in a very small town in Maryland, and she lived with us, and she worked the night shift. So when my parents were at work, she was at home, and then they would switch off. But she was very strict, very scary sometimes, which I know now is a very typical kind of critical care nurse persona. But she really instilled with me a love of service, of being generous and being open-hearted, but also to be a hard worker. So I've always wanted to honor her It just took me many, many years to figure out how I would do so. And I do feel that I maybe made this film too late because she passed many years ago, and I made this film to kind of bring her memory back in a way.
Oh, that's very nice.
Thank you.
And that means to say you were also born here already?
Yes, I was born in Maryland.
And tell me about your parents. They came from the Philippines, first immigrant, I mean.
Yes, exactly. So my aunt, Tita Dodo, was the first in our family to come to the U.S. And then my mom followed soon after.
She's the sister.
She's the sister. She was recruited by the International Monetary Fund. And my dad, who was in love with her, followed her to the United States. And they started their family here on the East Coast.
And you are the first, tell me about your brothers and sisters.
Well, I'm the middle of three girls. So it's Karen. She still lives in the D.C. area. And then my younger sister, Anna Josue, she's also a co-producer of the film. We work together on everything. She's my best friend. She works and lives in Los Angeles. And funny story, the day that we premiered Nurse Unseen this past Friday, she gave birth to her second baby.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
yes.
So it was a big day. It was a theatrical premiere of Nurse Unseen and also the world premiere of Baby Charlotte.
Okay. So now I see that your connection to your Tita Dodo is more than just being honoring her as a nurse, but honoring really her as almost a second mother.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes. So, what was it that gave you the impetus or gave you the courage to do this film? Because it's very expensive, isn't it, to do a film, documentary?
Making any type of film at this type of level is such a big endeavor, and it does take a lot of expenses, but I just felt it was so worthy, and it was almost tragic that there hadn't been a film about our nurses and the Filipino American nursing experience in a feature form. So I thought, well, if no one else is going to do it, why don't we? It's that important. So we really just put it on our credit cards, and we got donations, and we did 2 Kickstarter campaigns to create this beautiful project. So I do love how this project is really community financed, community led. Even now, it's all about the community coming out to support what I feel is such a vital, important, and relevant film, especially for our community. But hopefully people beyond the Filipino American community can watch it and just get to know a lot more about our experience and how much we've all contributed to this country for decades.
Yes, yes. Eventually, we'll talk about the what other things that you have placed in them. But I met your producer.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Velayo.
Carlo Velayo.
Carlo
yes.
Velayo. Yes. So, how did you find him? Because from his statement, he said he came from Australia.
Yeah, he came from Australia, moved to New York about 12 years ago with a similar dream of telling stories and making films. And we got introduced by a mutual friend. We had coffee here in New York when I was premiering my first film at Doc NYC. And we just hit it off right away. I think we both found in each other a shared passion of telling more Filipino-centered stories and uplifting it into the mainstream. So it's really hard, I think, to share specifically Filipino type of films on mainstream media like Netflix or Hulu or even, in theaters. But because I felt like if we could join forces, we could do it together, and that was something that we should do. And I'm really, really honored to have him in my life and to be such a close collaborator and friend of his.
That's great. So he helped as a producer. What was he helpful? I mean, producer I know is getting many things together.
Yes.
Yes. You have a good research. Did you have a good research team?
Yeah. So my sister, the co-producer, she did a lot of the research. So she's really great at about finding all types of archival footage and articles, because this film is very research intensive. So that was really key. And then in terms of producing, it was all hands on deck type of situation. So Carlo's really great about networking and collaborating and lifting everybody's spirits and focusing them on the mission at hand, but also being really organized. And he has such a great heart. He's just really so amazing to work with. So I'm really blessed. And my entire team, we've really come together and worked so well together, and we are all in alignment on this project, that this is an important thing, so much bigger than ourselves, that, it's just a beautiful team effort.
Yes. And are you going to, will you be able to be nominated for the Oscar? Because, you almost told the story of the Philippines through the nurses.
Yes.
Story starting with, of course, the coming of the Americans. And you connected it with the Philippine Revolution.
Yes.
Yes. So it's almost like a microcosm of the Philippine story. And I admire your Barot Saya.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, can you just tell a lot? Because today, the month of October, is the Filipino American History Month. And we are celebrating it by having you and the film Nurses Unseen. So just as an aside, can you explain your, it's not really a Barot Saya. It's really, yes, could you explain it so that people will know if you have a black dress or a simple dress, you can just put it on and you are already in Philippine style.
Yes. So thank you so much for saying that. It's been important for me whenever I'm sharing about the film and representing the film in the theater and talking about it, that I want to also represent the culture with what I wear. So while we've been on tour with this film, with the film festival circuit, and now in theaters, I've been trying to represent Filipino and Filipino American designers as much as possible. So what I'm wearing is it's a modern twist, but it has that traditional Filipiniana, the butterfly sleeve silhouette, which I think is really beautiful. And also it's very easy to look put together because you could just throw it on.
Put it on.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, there is this Lola Weavers,
yes,
from Carissa Villacorta, because the people in the north, handcrafted,
yes,
and then it's made into the Zach. And this one is from Mindanao.
It's beautiful.
It's handcrafted too, because all of this is sewn by hand. So today is, not today. This month is October is the Filipino American History Month. So you have to see this film, this documentary, because it tells the story of the Filipino, not only from the time of the nurses coming here, but even the revolution of the Filipino.
Yeah.
During the Spanish time.
Yeah, thank you. That's so insightful. When we were putting the film together, I thought it was really important that people also understand that there was this grander historical context, that to understand what was happening to our nurses and our community now, you really had to learn more about the deliberate policy decisions between the U.S. and the Philippines, and just understand more of that historical context. And this was something that unfortunately was never taught to me as a girl growing up and going through the American school system. And it's something I had to proactively find out for myself and educate myself as an adult. So I wanted to really impart that in this film. And you're right, it is more broad than just the story of the Filipino American nurse. It's really the story of our titos and our titas and our cousins and our entire community.
Yes, and in fact, you even included martial law. Marcos declaring martial law.
Yeah, I thought that was definitely important to show.
Yes, that's part of the migration of Filipino nurses.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and we speak to a really charming group of nurses who are now based in California. They call themselves the Sisterhood, and they all left the Philippines at that time during martial law. And they were very homesick, and they ended up at a hospital in Kansas City, very different from Manila, but they just didn't want to go back because, according to what the nurse says in the film, Nurse Joyette, it was more of a dictatorship at that time, and they didn't feel safe going back home.
Yes, yes. And when I was watching it, I was very surprised that you were able to do on both coastal. You had nurses in New York and then nurses on film in California.
Yes.
How did you manage that?
Well, because...
I mean, in terms of your storytelling.
Yeah, no, that is an amazing question, and it was definitely intentional because there's so many Filipino nurses everywhere, all across the U.S. and abroad, just everywhere in the world. We really had to narratively focus because it just would have been too unwieldy of a story. So we thought as a team that would be best to really focus our lens on the experience of Filipinos on the West Coast, specifically in California and New York, as the two highest concentrations of where Filipino healthcare workers are. So it just made sense that way. And we were filming during COVID, so we really wanted to minimize that amount of travel and potential exposure for the crew and also the people that we were filming.
And also you were able to capture the grief.
Yeah.
I think nobody in that audience had a dry eye when we saw a portion of your Tita Dodo.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is my fourth project, my fourth film. So I'm very blessed to have had a lot of projects under my belt at this point. But thematically, thinking back, I do think in a way all the projects are about grief. I suffered some really tremendous losses in my life, even when I was young. Actually, yesterday marks the 26th anniversary of one of my best friend's murder, Matthew Shepard. He was murdered in 1998 in Laramie, Wyoming, and that was what my first film was about.
Is that really?
Yeah.
What's the title of that film?
It's called Matt Shepard Is a Friend of Mine.
Oh, my
And that was the film that ultimately we won the Emmy for. But it was really a tribute to him, his life, and his legacy. And from that project forward, I realized that all my projects some way tie to grief and how people are able to move through it, because I find that not only fascinating but really inspiring. Because when you experience that type of loss or that type of devastating grief, it can be paralyzing. But in all these instances, whether it's Matt Shepard Is a Friend of Mine or Nurse Unseen, you really get to know these inspiring people who are able to somehow not only survive but thrive and really keep going. Because ultimately, as we know, grief is just loss, love, but as I've heard on a show, love but with no place to put it,
Yes.
So I do find it fascinating, and I hope that other audiences, when they see these types of stories, feel inspired and not so alone.
Okay. Tell us, if you don't know about Mike Shepard.
Yes.
Yes. Could you just tell the audience?
Sure. So Matthew Shepard was a young man who was from Laramie, Wyoming, but I happened to go to school with him, a boarding school in Switzerland, so that's how we became close friends. We did theater together. He was just an extraordinary young person, really full of life. But when he went to college in Laramie, Wyoming, one fateful night in October of 1998, he was kidnapped, beaten, tortured, and strung up on a fence in a remote prairie field and left to die. And it just so happened that a biker who was biking across that field found him strung up on this fence and thought he was a scarecrow because it was around near Halloween. And that sparked this crazy movement. This was before social media, so what was happening with Matt and the updates on his health was all over CNN, 24/7. You could see new updates about his condition on the ticker tape running across the bottom of the screen on CNN. And I was a sophomore in college at that time, and I was turned on the news, and I was like, oh my God, that's my friend. So that was really hard to grapple with and understand. Wait, these people attacked and murdered my friend because they thought he was different. And that changed me. And that's why I wanted to make this film, to share with people that this is something that should never have happened. Unfortunately, it's a film that's still relevant, but it is important because through his death, his parents were inspired to begin the Matthew Shepard Foundation, and their sole mission is to spread understanding and compassion and acceptance all across the world in hopes that this type of story doesn't happen again.
Yes, it's because he was gay.
Yes.
And in Texas,
Wyoming, yes.
Oh, sorry. In Wyoming, it was not, and in many parts of the United States and the world, being gay is not acceptable. So
Yes.
this was a hate crime, actually.
Yes, it was probably the most notorious anti-gay hate crime in U.S. history.
Yes, and that started the movement.
Yes,
Yes, yeah.
And his mother, Judy Shepard, was just awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom a few months ago, actually.
By President Biden.
Yes,
Oh, my
correct.
goodness. Yes. Well, she deserves that.
Yeah.
And you deserve also a prize for bringing up these very, very difficult topics. As you said, grief is so hard to exhibit.
Yeah.
And you have done it in honor of your friend, in honor of your aunt.
Yes.
Yes. So that's very, very good. Hearing you talk about film, what inspired you to be a filmmaker? First of all, although you're born here, which is great. So why was that the area that you wanted to go to?
I think just as a little girl, right away, I always knew I wanted to go into the arts, but specifically storytelling. So growing up in my neighborhood in Maryland, in suburban Maryland, I would always play with my friends. We would write skits and plays. I had a home video camera, and we were always making movies about each other.
Is that the Super 8?
Super 8, High 8 camera, whatever technology was available at that time, I wanted to get my hands on it. I just really like that medium of not only playing together, but communicating through art. And I think it was also important for me as a young girl to try on different types of personalities and step into another person's shoes, by exploring stories in this type of way.
So you would be also not only the filmmaker, but also the director, the actor.
Yeah, I really liked that. And my initial dream was to be a theater actress. So my mom, she worked at the IMF. And because
IMF is International Monetary Fund.
Yes. And one of the perks for her for working in the IMF was they would pay for a certain percentage of the tuition if you wanted to send your kids abroad. And my mom just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And when I was in middle school, so like 12 years old, she asked me if I wanted to go to boarding school in Switzerland. And I had never been away from home before ever. But I said, sure.
For high school?
Yeah, for middle school and high school.
Middle school?
Yeah.
You were only 12.
I was very, very young. Yeah. I did not know what that would entail, really leaving home. So it was quite a shock. But I really ultimately, I really came to love this experience of being in boarding school, and I discovered my love of the arts and theater at that school. And actually, at one of my screenings of Nurse Unseen, my theater teacher came with her husband, and I just saw her in the audience. I almost started crying because it was so special and full circle to have her there.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I really just always liked being involved in storytelling. So after doing a lot of plays, I was in every high school play I could audition for.
Which one would you say is memorable?
For me, I was in Midsummer Night's Dream.
So they presented it in Switzerland?
Yeah, we did all these plays. I was Frenchie in Greece. You know, I would
Yes,
do
yes.
anything I could.
What were you in Midsummer's Night Dream?
I was Puck.
Oh, wow, that's a terrific role.
Yeah.
Buck is the fairy or the mischievous imp.
Yes,
yes,
exactly. Then I was in Our Town, so I like died in that film. I mean, in that movie. But I really just loved every aspect of putting a production together. And I loved the feeling of working collectively together towards something like bigger than yourself. And I just wanted that feeling for the rest of my life. So then when I found out about film and how you can actually make you can go into it professionally, make a career out of this, I was looking up film schools all across the U.S., found out about Emerson College in Boston, and then applied there and went to film school there, where I learned about editing, about documentary, about working in the industry, which is very intense. You have to deal with a lot of personalities and rejection. I mean, that's just part of the whole part of what it is to be in this industry. So yeah, it's just something I've always wanted to do my entire life.
So you finished 4 years at Emerson for a film?
Yes, and then I did my last semester at Emerson at their satellite campus in Los Angeles, and I interned at several production companies there. Worked on Alvin and the Chipmunks 1, Alvin and the Chipmunks 2, Ugly Betty, just various, shows and films that I could get a job in as like a PA, and just learned as much as I could. But there was a point in time where I felt like, maybe now's the time for me to really step into my own and make, my own films and devote all this like time and energy that I was sharing on other people's projects, but use that towards my stuff, And I shared with you how one of my best friends in high school, Matthew Shepard, passed in 1998 when I was a sophomore in film school. And I knew that would be my first film, that when I was professionally and emotionally ready, that a film about who Matt really was, that was going to be my first film, and it was.
And that was the film that won an Emmy.
Yeah, my debut film, yes.
Yes, fantastic. For a first-time filmmaker to win an Emmy, that is superb, yes. But everybody is shocked. It shocked the United States conscience. A little bit like Emmett Till shocked the conscience of the African-American who was also brutally murdered.
Yes.
Yes. Now, from there, so you went to filmmaker and with this first film.
Yes.
Now, how did you go to Cebu with this?
This is such a funny story.
Song. What do you call it now? Funny, Happy Jail.
Yeah, it's a funny story because, I saw it like the rest of the world on YouTube. Always thought about that YouTube viral video. I was really wanting to make a project about this, but I was busy with my first film. So when that film was kind of over, I started switching my focus. How could we do this film about the dancing inmates? So I just did my research, and I found that the jail consultant, the person who was in charge of the jail, Marco Terral, I saw that he was on Facebook. So I just messaged him, and I pitched him my idea. I said, if I was to go to Cebu and visit my family and go to the jail, could I see the dancing inmates dance? I want to do this potential project on them. And he was really excited, and he's like, come on down. So I went, and I remember me, my partner at the time, and my parents, we went and saw the dancing inmates. They performed just for the four of us, and for 45 minutes, and I had goosebumps watching them perform. They were incredible.
Fantastic. But there's a lesson for everybody. She wanted to get a film in Cebu. She just wrote the supervisor, the director.
Yeah,
yes,
on Facebook.
So this shortest way to another point is a straight line. You just go direct. You never know. They answered, and they answered for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No problem.
No, it probably should have been more of a process, but it was incredibly easy to just at least gain access in the initial days.
And how were you interacting with the prisoners? Were they all helpful?
Yeah,
No problem.
the amazing thing about that project was how cooperative and excited most of the inmates were to be a part of it. And from everything that I've seen done on the dancing inmates, like various news shows, it was always in some way like framing how exotic the experience was, and like the person doing the project about them would always be up above them on the platform looking down at the inmates. But for us, I really wanted it to feel different. I wanted us to be like embedded with them, to share their lived experience. So we would come down onto the floor onto the jail floor and be at their level, dance with them. We would even like pass the camera around to them. We really wanted it to feel like their real experience and be really genuine.
There are some questions from the audience. All right. The first one is, what chances, if any, were made between the film festival version and the theatrical release version of the film Nurse Unseen? And that's from Pablo T.
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think. Actually, I think we condensed a little bit, tried to tighten it up. So I was able to shave off another minute off of the film. And we did do some additional B-roll changes, especially around the martial law section. So we could really highlight what it was like at that time.
Yes, that's very good. Yes.
Yeah.
Could you explain the process and requirements for campaigning for an Academy Award nomination now that the film is Academy Award qualifying? So how do you qualify as an Academy Award film?
I love that question, and I love answering it in regards to Nurse Unseen, which is such a special, special film. I'm so proud to be a part of it. But in terms of qualifying or being Oscar eligible, you do have to have a week-long theatrical run in certain cities, including New York, Los Angeles, I believe Chicago, and maybe Atlanta. But we just are going through our New York theatrical week-long run now, and we technically qualify, which is amazing and just such a big feat to get, an independent film at that level. So we're really excited.
Week long means 1 week, 7 days?
Yeah, 7 days with minimum of 3 shows per day. So it's a lot of screenings. So we really hope people come out and watch the film. And in our first 2 days of screening in New York, we already sold out 4 shows, which is so impressive. I'm really, really proud of the community for coming out and supporting this film.
Wow, that's terrific.
Yes.
Okay, anyone listening this, please go to your website and look for this Nurse Unseen. It's being shown in major cities.
Yes.
Terrific. And then, what resources are typically needed, and what steps must be taken to campaign successfully for an Academy Award? And that's from Michelle A.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I think this is a whole new league that we're dealing with right now. So yes, we've had a lot of amazing grassroots support, and community organizations have really supported the film, but we need to cross over and reach a broader audience. So it will need a all hands on deck approach, really. We'll have to do a lot of for your consideration screening events and panels, and just really get more people aware of this project. So, similar to the Filipino nurses kind of being the underdog, so is this film. So we really need people to just be aware of it. So word of mouth has been really helpful. I'm sure it'll take additional injection of funds to start this type of campaign, just getting the film seen in front of the right people. It's just going to be a really worthy endeavor, but anything difficult is worth doing. And we believe in this project so deeply that I think we're going to try it.
Yes. All right. So there's the can-do attitude, everyone. It's maybe difficult, but worth doing. And the last one is, there are a few more, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Are there any future projects you're working on now or you're passionate about exploring next? That's from Josh T?
Oh, great question. Well, since Happy Jail, Carlo and myself, we're really passionate and focused on telling Filipino and Filipino American centered stories. So we're definitely on the hunt for those types of projects and really uplifting narratives and experiences of the marginalized communities that don't necessarily get their stories amplified and centered in the mainstream. So we're always on the search for some. We definitely have one in development, but we can't really talk about that now. But one really fun project that I've always wanted to do is a documentary, maybe even a short documentary about the history of Jollibee. I think that would be fascinating.
That's good, yes, because Jollibee is expanding in the United States.
Yes.
Yes. Can you just tell, since we were not able to, when you mentioned Happy Jail, for those who have not seen it, can you just tell where can we find it and is it if it's still available?
Yes. So Happy Jail is my Netflix original documentary series that premiered on the platform worldwide. So it's available in 190 countries in August of 2019, and it's still up on the platform. And Happy Jail is a really special project, and that's about the jail that's home to the dancing inmates who went viral many years ago for dancing to Michael Jackson's Thriller. And if you remember the video on YouTube, there's just hundreds of inmates dancing all together in their orange jumpsuits, and they're really, really good at dancing. And I wanted to make that program or that show because I really wanted to show how this was only possible in the Philippines. We're great dancers, we're really talented, but what is so inspiring about our culture is that we can really find joy and connection even in the most challenging circumstances. So that's a really amazing project. So if you have Netflix, please check it out.
All right, just hear that? Check it out, Happy Jail. And the last question is, what kinds of changes are you hoping to inspire in viewers after they watch Nurse Unseen?
Wow, that's a great question.
Especially in relation to Filipino American healthcare workers.
Yeah. Well, we titled the film Nurse Unseen because we wanted to point to this big problem of how our Filipino American healthcare workers, although they're so embedded in the healthcare system, not only here in the US, but globally, they're just not very recognized, not seen, not celebrated and acknowledged in the way that they should. So in making this film, we really wanted to share with people, hopefully beyond our community, what it's like, and to really connect with what they're doing and what they've lost, what they've sacrificed in a really deeply human and emotional way. So I hope we touch people's hearts and they just know a little bit more of what it's like to be a nurse, to be Filipino, to be Filipino American.
All right, you have it here on the Loida Lewis podcast. Live, love, laugh and learn together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, galing.
The Loida Lewis Podcast, hosted by Loida Lewis, is produced by the creators of Over a Glass or Two, Jesse and JV, executive produced by Loida Nicolas Lewis. Rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for a chance to be featured on a future episode. Have a question for Miss Loida? Just email us on askloidalewis@gmail.com. Your question might make its way to a future episode. Subscribe on all major platforms to never miss a beat. Thank you for listening to the Loida Lewis Podcast. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn together